Good morning. Happy Monday. Welcome, everybody. Today is the beginning of a new week. We're also at the beginning of another month. So I want to welcome everyone to this morning's focus activity. My name is Jennifer, and I'm a teacher with English in the City Prazo. This morning, we're doing focus activity 6-7. This morning, we're also live on our YouTube channel and on our Facebook page. So I want to thank everyone for tuning in this morning. And as you join the focus group, please say hello, type in your name, and let me know who you are so that we can participate in our focus activity together. For those of you just tuning in, my name is Jennifer, and welcome. This is the beginning of a new month and a new week. For those of you that have been following us on our live focus activities, we've done a lot of traveling, a lot of shopping, and a lot of talking. But this time, we're taking another trip, and we're taking a trip down memory lane. We are talking about the past. And not just the historical past, we're talking about our past. Because often we find that when we have conversations with other people, we talk about ourselves. We talk about ourselves the way we are now, and we talk about ourselves the way we were. So we need to be able to talk about ourselves in the past. Where did you study? Where did you work? And what did you do? We're going to be practicing different forms of different past tenses so that we can talk about ourselves the best way possible. So thank you everyone for tuning in this morning. My name is Jennifer, and this morning we are doing focus activity. Good morning, Greta. Thank you so much for joining me today. As you join the focus activity, and good morning, Danieri, please type your name in the conversation box and let me know that you're here this morning. We're doing focus activity 6-7, talking about the past. And in this focus activity, we're going to be talking about ourselves using past simple and the past continuous. We're going to talk about past experiences. Before we get started, we know that past simple and past continuous are both past tenses. Does anyone know the difference between the two? This is something we're going to review in today's focus. But let me see what you know already about the past simple and the past continuous. Does anyone in our group today know the difference? I know we use both of these tenses very often, especially when we're telling stories and when we're talking about ourselves. And in this activity, we're going to see how to use them both either separately or in the same sentence. This is our first slide of our activity, talking about the past. Where were you born and raised? Where and what did you study? And in answering this question, we're going to consider primary and secondary schools if you studied at college or a university, and if you've gone on for a professional degree or a master's degree. The first question, where were you born and raised? What does it mean to be raised? We know what it means to be born, but what does it mean to be raised, and who does it? What do you raise? And who raises who? Does anyone know what it means to raise? And it doesn't mean to get up in the morning or to lift something up. Well, yes, you can raise a glass. If you're doing a toast, you can raise a glass. For example, I was born. Thank you very much, Greta. Greta says, I was born at Firenze. I was born, Greta, in New York. I was born in New York. But you don't know what raised means. If you have parents and you have children, the parents raise the children and the children grow up. So basically, the question, where were you raised? Meaning, where did you grow up? Or where did your parents raise you? I was born in New York. You're welcome. And I was raised on Long Island. It could be the town where you grew up. It could be the city where you and your family lived while you were growing up. And obviously, because we were born in the past, this is a past question. Where were you born? I was born in New York. Where were you raised? I was raised on Long Island. Okay, very good, Greta. Remember, the past of grow is grew. So I grew up in Prato, and that means your parents raised you or are raising you in Prato. Where did you study? Now, as you come up with responses to these questions, just put them in the conversation box so we can go over the grammar together. I studied since I was born in New York and I was raised on Long Island. I studied on Long Island, primary school and secondary school. I studied, however, at university in New York City. Thank you very much, Danieri. Danieri says, I was born in Prato and I was raised in Prato. Why was raised? Because we don't raise ourselves. Children grow up and parents raise children. So notice also the question is, where were you born and raised? Two questions would be, where were you born? Where were you raised? And as you answered the first part of the question, Ranieri, I was born in Prato. Also, the second part should be in the same form. I was born in Prato. I was raised in Prato. Yes, exactly. The same way I was born in New York, I was raised on Long Island in New York. And where did you study? And what did you study? I said that I studied on Long Island in primary and secondary school, but I studied in New York City at university. And then I also studied at another university on Long Island. Yes. So I know that Greta is still studying, but Danieri, where did you study and what did you study? Use in the same sentence, always past continuous. Right now, actually, Danieri, we're doing the past simple. Because notice the questions. The questions asked, where were you born, which is past simple, And what did you study? Which is also past simple. We haven't started the past continuous yet, but it is possible to use past continuous and past simple in the same sentence. And Greta says that she studied in Prato. Ah, okay. You studied in primary school. I studied in primary school in Prato. And now you are in secondary school. Thank you very much, Greta. I also studied my entire childhood on Long Island, and then I studied in New York City for university. Now, you're in secondary school now, but maybe you can tell me, Greta, what are you studying? Now, notice, Ranieri, okay, when I ask Greta this question, it's because she's studying now. So we're doing present continuous. But for you and I that finished studying a while ago, we're doing past simple. So what are you studying now, Greta? And Ranieri, where did you go to school? Ah, in the 70s. I thought I understood you studied for 70 years. I was like, oh my gosh. How old are you? So you studied in the 70s in secondary school in a technical institute. Very good. And so you studied if you studied at a technical institute, what were you studying? That's okay. I understood you. Afterwards, I understood. I actually studied the visual arts in New York City. I studied painting, sculpture, printmaking, and photography. And then as I narrowed down my specialization, I focused on painting. Yes. And Greta, what are you studying now in school? And do you like school? So notice that these initial questions of our activity were in the past simple for those of us who finished studying several years ago. But when I asked Greta what she is studying now, because she's still in school now. Thank you very much, Greta. Greta says, I study history, science, maths, art, music, Italian, and geography. French and English. Very good, Greta. Thank you very much. Here, our next slide in our activity, we want to match the left to the right. So we're forming complete sentences to create a short biography. And we want to keep this biography in mind because later we're going to create a biography for ourselves, an autobiography for ourselves. You studied accounting, Daniele. Oh, so you're good with numbers. Are you an accountant? Are you an accountant? So let's take a look at the prompts on the left side of the screen, and we want to match the left side to the right side. For example, the first question of our activity was, where were you born? Very good. I studied accounting. Where were you born was the first question of today's activity. And notice here the first prompt is, I was born. I was born. Ah, you were an accountant. You're not an accountant anymore. Thank you, Greta. Greta says, I was born in the country. We're going to get to outside of Vienna in a minute. So I was born in the country. I grew up just. Now, Greta, are you ready? Outside of Vienna. I was born in the country. I grew up just outside of Vienna. I went to. Oh, he's like me. I loved going to school. I really did. In fact, I was so sorry when I finished studying because I wanted to continue. And then for a while, I entertained the idea of getting my master's. I would have liked to have gone on and gotten my PhD, but life got in the way. And I had to grow up and make a living. Couldn't spend my time being a professional student. Thank you. Greta says, I went to an art school. To get? Are you asking me a question that any school to get a master's? Yes, I got my 4-year degree. I got my bachelor degree. And then if you continue, you get your master's, which is a specialization in what you've already studied. After your master's, if you're really, really, really determined, you can go on to get your PhD, in which case you become an actual doctor of your specialization. And that's what I wanted to do. But I got distracted. I studied both. So if he went to an art school, what did he study? In fact, I studied this as well. And I slept. It's a shame. I didn't appreciate it at the time when I was so young. All the classes that I was in. Sometimes university is wasted on the young. We should go to university a little bit later, maybe. We should spend more time in high school and then go to university when we can really appreciate the environment. I studied both history and visual arts. Thank you. Very good, you guys. In fact, art history, now I'm appreciating art history a lot more, especially living here in Italy and so close to Florence. It's really incredible. But not even just the European art history, but also art history in all different cultures is amazing. Okay, I worked at. In fact, this is something I thought. This is something I thought I wanted to do when I was younger. But it didn't actually pan out. And I met several people who did this for a living, but it's extremely, extremely competitive, the environment. So where did this person work? After he studied in an art school, he studied history and visual arts. He grew up outside of Vienna. And then where did he work? Where do you think he worked? In a gallery for a while. Very good. He worked at a gallery for a while, and then he went back to school to get a master's in art history. And as I mentioned before, that when you study anything, but in this case, he studied art for 4 years. When you go back to school, you can get a master's degree in a specialization. For example, I studied the visual arts for 4 years. If I were to go back and get my master's, I would get my master's in a category. I could get my master's in art history. I could get my master's in painting or another art. And after that, you can actually continue to get your doctorate, which is your PhD. Here we want to create an autobiography. In the past slide, we were talking about someone else, but now we want to talk about ourselves. So our autobiographies, Greta, are going to be a little bit longer, but no, I'm sure you can find things to talk about yourself as well to talk about. And we're going to use these prompts to create our own autobiography. As you come up, you don't have to write all of them together. You can write one at a time. So as you come up with a phrase, just put it in the box. For example, I was born in New York. And then from there, we can continue our autobiography. I grew up, on the other hand, I grew up on Long Island. And this would be the second part of my autobiography. So you can do the same. And then you could talk about where you went to school. As we stated in the previous slides, Greta told us that she went to primary school in Prato. Very good, Greta. I grew up in Prato. And there's the beginning of your autobiography. I grew up on Long Island. And Greta was also born. She was born in Florence. You were born in Florence. I went to primary school and secondary school on Long Island. And in secondary school, I studied music and art, among other subjects, but I focused on music and art in secondary school. Thank you, Danieri. You say I was born in Prato and I grew up in Prato. Very good. I'm assuming then that you also studied in primary school and secondary school in Prato. And tell me where you worked. I've worked all over the place. So I work up, very good, Daniele. Grow up. It's one of those phrasal verbs. When you have a verb and a preposition, that has an entirely new meaning. So I worked in New York City for a while, and I also worked on Long Island for several years. And Greta studies all of her major subjects in secondary school: history, geography, music, art, science, maths, Italian, French, and English. We see also that you have a lot of languages. So I'm assuming, Greta, that you're going to focus on languages and you don't work. Of course you work. You're studying. That is your job. Okay, then I went to, well, right now you're still studying, so this part doesn't concern you, Greta, but I worked on Long Island, and then I went to university in New York City. And I've had many jobs. I've worked in restaurants. I've worked at libraries. I've worked in retail. And now I am an English teacher. All right, take a moment, please, and look at these two questions talking about experiences. What tense is used to talk about a finished experience? What tense is used to talk about a finished action in the past? What tense is used to talk about something in progress in the past? Take a moment, look at these two questions, and put your answer in the conversation box. Okay, right now we're talking about experiences. And when we talk about past experiences, as we mentioned at the beginning of the focus, we use two types of past tense. We use the past simple and the past continuous. And it's these two tenses, these two past tenses that we're going to consider now. We use both of these when we talk about either a finished action or something that is in progress. Which is which? If we talk about a finished action, do we use the past simple or the past continuous? And if we talk about something that is in progress in the past, do we use the past simple or the past continuous? Notice that in the beginning of our focus activity, all of our questions, where were you born? Where were you raised? Where did you study? Daniele, is this your autobiography? After the military service, I worked in Prato in your father's company, I'm assuming, for 5 years after I worked in a bank, especially in the leasing sector. And the last years, I worked in a foreign office in the bank. Wow, that is some experience. You have a lot of life experience, Daniele. Good for you. So you've worked a lot in the bank sector. That sounds very, very difficult. I'm not very good with numbers. So if you notice, Greta, if you notice also that Daniele's autobiography, notice the tense that he used. He's used the past simple. Why? Because these are finished actions. And that answers our first question. We use the past simple to talk about finished actions in the past. That being the case, if we're talking about something in progress in the past, we're going to use the past continuous. Does anyone in our group this morning know the grammatical formula for the past continuous? Subject. If we have the verb to be, we know that it is in the past. So we have subject plus was plus were, was or were, and the ing form of the verb. Here we have some examples. I grew up in the countryside just outside of Seattle. Past simple. My parents bought a farmhouse there before I was born. Past simple. They were trying to live a simple rural life. Past tense. Very good. So, Daniele, I think there's a little bit of a delay this morning. The past tense you're referring to is the past tense we use for finished actions in the past. Also, your autobiography, because these are all finished actions or finished experiences in your life. Just as when I spoke about myself and I said, I was born in New York, I was raised on Long Island, I studied on Long Island, primary, secondary school, and I studied art at university. These are all finished experiences. So we use the past simple. But if I talk about something that was in progress in the past, then I used past continuous. And notice the form here. Subject, verb to be, were, and the gerund, ing. Why? Because during this time in the past, they were trying to live a simple life. So they didn't try for an instant. They were trying through the course of several years to live a simple life in the past because it was something that was in progress. Past simple versus past continuous. The past simple is used to talk about experiences which often have a specified time in the past. And this is something that we remember when we compare the past simple with the present perfect. What's the difference? The past simple has a time reference. It is time specific. What did you do last week? Where did you go last summer? What did you watch on TV last night? Who did you speak to on the telephone? These are all specific time references, so it is past simple. We went to the Caribbean last year. If it was a continuous action, we used past continuous. How so? What were you doing last night? Notice there is also a time reference here, but I'm asking for an action that had a duration of time. We were dancing at a beach nightclub. So this is also an activity that needs to last, not something that is an instant moment. We also use the past continuous with the past simple to talk about interrupting actions. Present perfect, Daniele says, present perfect is an action in the past, but that can repeat. Exactly. Why? We often use the present perfect when we're talking about ourselves. Why? Because we're still alive. So, for example, I have traveled a lot in my life. Why? Because I'm still alive. If I refer to someone who is no longer alive, I would say they had traveled a lot during their life, which tells the listener that this person is no longer alive. So how do we use the past continuous and the past simple together? We were swimming in the ocean when we saw a sea turtle. So we have we were swimming is the action that's happening over a period of time. We saw a sea turtle is the action that interrupts it. And as Ranieri added, talking about the present perfect, which is also a tense used referring to past events, we use the present perfect also when the event can repeat itself in the present or in the future. But if we're using the past continuous with the past simple, we have when and while. And we need to introduce both of these tenses with either when or while. Let's take a look at number one. We use to introduce the past simple. Do we use when or while to introduce the past simple? Notice if we remember the sentence from our last slide, While I was, wait a minute. Thank you. Thank you, Greta. And thank you, Danieri. When is past simple? In fact, if we notice on this slide, we were swimming when we saw a sea turtle. Notice that when introduces the past simple. So that being the case, while is past continuous. Thank you very much. We use when to introduce past simple. We use while to introduce past continuous. For example, Daniele gave us an example of this. While I was taking a shower, or while I was having a shower, the phone rang. If we flip-flop the clauses, when the phone rang, I was taking a shower. While I was taking a shower, the phone rang. So we don't have when and while in the same sentence. Very good. Having a shower. In the UK, they say have a shower. In the US, we say take a shower. And they always ask us, take it where? But that's what we do. We take a shower, we take a bath, we take a bus, we take a train. Here we have 4 sentences, and we want to fill in the blanks with either the past simple or the past continuous. The clue here lies in where you see when and where you see while. If there is no clue of when and while, then take a look at the actions themselves to decide which action is longer and which action interrupts. While I was studying, my mom was chatting. Here, Greta, you have 2 past continuous that are happening at the same time. You have 2 actions that are in progress at the same time. While I was studying, my mom was chatting. Let's remember that when we form a past continuous phrase, we need the subject, the verb to be, was or were, and the ing form of the verb. While I was studying, my mom was chatting. While I was having a shower, the telephone rang. Let's take a look at number 1. When the pizza man, and there's your clue, because in this sentence we have a when. So if the when introduces the past simple, what would we? I was sleeping when the pizza man arrived. Very good. Thank you very much, Greta and Ranieri. I was sleeping because this is a long activity, an activity in progress, when the pizza man arrived. Let's take a look at number 2. She, a celebrity, while she to work last weekend. And here we also have the clue. We have while. We know that while introduces the past continuous. So she saw a celebrity. Very good, Greta. While she So if she saw a celebrity while she was driving. Very good, Ranieri, and very good, Greta. And notice here that the first clause is past simple. In number 1, the first clause is past continuous. So either clause can go first. The people. All right, take a look, Greta, because in number 3, we also have when. When. So when it started to rain, so what were the people doing? What were they doing? I just gave you the clue. Because if you have when introducing a finished activity, the people were playing. Why were playing? Why is it the people were playing and not was playing? Because people is plural. People is like they. I could say he was walking his dog, or he was playing. Very good, Daniela, because people is plural. People is plural. So they were playing, the people were playing when it started to rain. Number 4, I'm sorry, Greta, did you tell me number 4? He, while, and person is singular. Very good. 1 person, 10 people. All right, we're on our last one. Greta says texted. He texted. Do you remember, Greta, the example that you gave us before while you were studying? What was your mom doing? It sounds to me like these are 2 activities in progress. He was texting while he was watching. In the first 3 sentences, we have past simple and past continuous. But in the 4th sentence, we have 2 past continuous. Why? Because these are 2 actions that are in progress at the same time. For example, sometimes I read and listen to music. So I like reading and listening to music at the same time. These are 2 activities that can happen at the same time, so they are in progress at the same time. So we use the past continuous. There are several types of verbs, though. We have active verbs like run, play, jump. And then we have stative verbs or stative verbs. Are verbs that describe how something feels or seems. They are not actions. They are not used in the continuous form. What are some examples of these? Like, hate, believe, understand, have, appear, seem, and love. These aren't verbs where you can use the ing form. For example, I'm liking a chocolate cake a lot. No. I am hating him. No. These are a condition of being. So these we cannot use in the gerund. In the gerund form, except for have. You can say I'm having a really good time. Appear and seem. Let me give you an example, Greta. Appear and seem. It means that when something looks a certain way. For example, she appears very tired. She appears tired. Means that when I look at her, I can see that she is tired. Or it seems like it's going to rain. It seems like it's going to rain. Why? Because today it's very cloudy and it's very gray. So it's how something looks visually at the moment. Okay, here we have some sentences to correct. We have 6 examples. We want to find the mistakes in the sentence on the right. if there are mistakes, because there are a few in there that are correct, and we want to fix them. So if you see a sentence that is incorrect and you need to fix it, give me the number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, 5, or 6, and write the correct sentence. For example, number 1 is, I was hating the new Spider-Man movie. Now, we just saw on the previous slide that hate is a stative verb, a state of being. So you cannot have the gerund. I just gave you the answer for number 1. How can you rewrite number 1 so that it is correct? How can you rewrite number 1 so that it is correct? So obviously, these sentences you cannot use in the past continuous. You can use them in the present continuous, some of them though. Some of them, yes. For example, having. You can use I was having. Some things you can have, but we're getting to a whole nother grammatical argument. So we're going to leave that alone. And this focus activity, have, is a stative verb. You cannot use the past continuous. Okay, so looking at number 1, we have I was hating the new Spider-Man movie. If we see that we cannot use the past continuous with was hating, number 1, if I correct it, is I. Okay, thank you. Greta says that number 1 is not correct. And the correct sentence would be, I hated the new Spider-Man movie. No correct for me. I hate or I hated the new Spider-Man movie. Thank you. What about number 2? Number 2, Greta says, she seemed happy after work yesterday. And you say it's correct. Yes. Why? Because in this case, it's past simple. And these verbs we can use in the past simple, but we cannot use in the past continuous. Let's take a look at number 3. We saw our friends at the supermarket today. So, Greta, number 3 is incorrect. We see our friends at the supermarket. Remember, because there is today, yes, but when we're referring to today, we use the past simple. Why? Because it's not right in the moment. Remember that we use present simple for routine and things we do every day. So for example, if I go to the supermarket every Monday, then I could say, I see my friends Monday at the supermarket, meaning I see them every Monday. But because it's today, it means I've already been to the supermarket. So we saw our friends at the supermarket today. Number 3 is correct. 1 is incorrect. 2 is correct. 3 is correct. Number 4, I was having a headache. I was having a headache. So we know that in this focus activity, we cannot use have with past continuous because it's a state of being. That being the case, is number 4 correct or incorrect, in your opinion? I was having a headache is correct. Number 4 is correct. Oh, Greta and Ranieri. It's incorrect because have in this focus, I said that we can use the past continuous with have in certain cases. You see, I shouldn't have said anything. For example, I was having a terrible time at the party yesterday. If you have a headache right now, then Anieri, you would say, I have a terrible headache. I have a headache now, not I'm having a headache. I have a headache. Because these are not, it is happening, yes, but it's a state of being. It's a state of being. If I say I was having a terrible time, have a time is different. I don't know why. I'm going to find out the reason why, though. Because you can be having a terrible time, but you have a headache. Like you have a cold. I have a sore throat. It's a state of being. So I can't put it in the continuous. I'm sorry. So I have a headache now. Or I had a headache yesterday. Number 5 is correct. My son was believing in Santa Claus last year. Let's take a look at some of our state of being verbs. In this focus activity, have state of being. Appear, seem, love. Like, hate, believe, and understand. These are not used in the continuous form. But have a time, Ranieri, have a time has got to be a phrasal verb. Or a phrasal, that's a term that we use. To have a time is something different. It's a different term. But if you have anything else, if you have a cold, if you have an accident, if you have an injury, then you cannot use it in the continuous form. But having a time, yes, only having a time. So because believe, I know. Forget having a time. Forget it. Take having a time and throw it out the window. It's the wrong activity. I should not have said anything. Only having a time, because you can have a good time, you can have a bad time. That is different. But if you have a headache, if you have a stomach ache, if you have an accident, if you have a breakup, then that is not something you can put in the ing. I know. Isn't English great? So let's just take having a time and forget it. Forget having a time. So seeing that in this focus activity, have is a state of being. You cannot use the ing. I had a headache or I have a headache. Believe is a state of being, a stative verb. So last year, my son believed in Santa Claus. Because here we also have, I'm sorry, Ranieri, sometimes I complicate the situation. I know, I complicate it. Here, for number 5, we have a past reference. Yes, we have a reference to a time last year. So my son believed in Santa Claus. They wanted to go to Ireland on vacation. I don't see a stative verb in there. And number 6, we see is correct. Yes, number 6 is correct. Okay, we're not going to write, it says write 3 sentences using past simple or past continuous. Read them to a partner and see if they can guess which one is the lie. We're not going to lie. Thank you, Greta. We're not going to lie for this last one because we only have a few minutes left. What are we going to do though? I'm going to ask each of you to give me a sentence using the past continuous and the past simple in the same sentence. So we need a 2-clause sentence. You can start with when, you can start with while. Remember that you cannot have when and while in the same sentence. It has to be when or while. And see if before we conclude our focus activity this morning, you can give me a correct sentence using past continuous and past simple. Now remember that the idea of today's activity was talking about ourselves, talking about our past, creating an autobiography. So you could also use that idea talking about your past experience using past continuous and past simple. How? I will show you. While I And here I have an example. While I was studying at university, I met my best friend. So I'm talking about myself. This is a past experience. I have something that was in action over a period of time while I was studying at university. And then during that period of time, there was an interruption. I met my best friend. So I met the person that became my best friend while I was studying at university. We're coming to the end of our focus activity. If you would like to give me an autobiographical sentence using when and while, I am all eyes and ears, because that was the focus of today's focus. Being able to talk about ourselves, our past experiences, using the past continuous and the past simple. We also examined not a new type of verb, but a different type of verb that is not an action verb. These are the stative verbs. And these we cannot use in the continuous form, neither present or past. And that's something to remember, because sometimes we hear that we do make errors when we're using some of these verbs, and we will add the ing by mistake. But these are certain verbs we need to remember that we cannot add the ing. So just a quick review as we conclude our focus activity for this morning. When we introduce the past simple, we use when. The past simple is a finished activity in the past. We use while to introduce past continuous. Past continuous talks about a past activity in progress. We started our focus activity this morning talking about ourselves. We went over also the meaning of to be raised. Remember that parents raise children and children grow up. So when you answer the question, where were you born and where were you raised? I was born in and I was raised, because I didn't raise myself. The action is to study, and the action to study is interrupted because, yes, and my action, very good, because while I was studying, I met my best friend. While I was starting artistic swimming, I met a lot of friends. Excellent, Greta. Thank you very, very much. So she gave us an autobiographical sentence in which she has an action in progress that was interrupted by something else. So while she was starting artistic swimming, she met a lot of friends. Thank you very much, everybody. I want to thank you so much for joining me this morning. It has been a great way to start the day and to start our week. It seems to be a beautiful day outside. So if you can, take advantage of it. Thank you, Greta. Thank you, Daniele. Thank you, everybody else who has tuned in this morning. And we will be live also again tomorrow, not only on YouTube, but also on our Facebook page. Have a great day, everybody, and I will see you here next time. Have a great day.